This is part 2 of my video on memorizing the shapes of African countries for the game of Worldle. As before, I just want to issue a disclaimer. We're going to use some very ridiculous images to try and link the name of each country to its shape. No offense is intended to any of these countries or their citizens. Let's get started. This country reminds me very much of a certain character, namely the Grinch. You can even see his little nose sticking out. But look what's going on up there on his forehead. It looks like a car has run into him, which of course makes him mad. And what type of car is it? A gas car. And so that helps us remember Madagascar. So when we see the Grinch with the big round divot in his forehead, Madagascar. This country looks so much like some kind of dancing genie or elf, and so I imagine this magical creature has whisked us away somewhere, and we ask it, "Where are we?" And it says, "Malawi." And we say again, "Where are we?" "Malawi." "Where are we?" "Malawi." And so when you see this shape of a little pixie creature, we think Malawi. I see the jutting jaw of a figure here, and it looks like this guy is wearing some kind of a hat, and I imagine the hat is green, which helps me remember that this pugnacious character is named O'Malley, and he's actually a little pug as well. Looks like somebody has turned him into a dog, and he's not too happy about it. But if I can picture pugnacious O'Malley, I'll remember Mali. So again, when I see that jutting chin and the green hat, I remember Mali. This shape looks to me like it has toppled over, so let's put it back on its side. And it looks like a face up in the top left, and I imagine that it has been attached to a crab's body, and so it's crawling along on these crab pincers, but it's far too heavy. It has been created by Dr. Moreau, but he has put more weight in the top, and so it topples over, and that helps me remember Mauritania. So when I see that toppled over crabman from Dr. Moreau, I think Mauritania. Now in this country I see more faces. There's one over on the left, guy with a big nose and a big upper lip. There's another guy up here in the top left, looks like he's lost his teeth. There's a guy with a beard in the top right, and then a guy here sticking his tongue out. So all of these characters, again, could be created by Dr. Moreau, and we'll notice that the guy in the bottom left has something sticking into his chin. So that could be a screw that is very painfully sticking out of his chin. And as a result, all of these characters have more issues, which helps us remember Mauritius. So again, when we see this shape with all the faces, and especially the guy with this screw coming out of his chin, we think Mauritius. Here I see a familiar face up in the top, and that is Mo the bartender from The Simpsons. And it looks like he has been turned into a fish, and he's been caught, and he's not too happy about it. And the specific kind of fish he is a rockfish, and therefore we get Morocco. So when I see Mo's face on a fish, I think Morocco. Here I see a character in a powdered wig carrying some kind of manuscript, and I imagine somebody like Mozart looking at his music, but he's got a duck's beak. So Mozart and beak helps me remember Mozambique. Again, this guy in the powdered wig holding up the big manuscript of music, but with a beak, Mozambique. This shape, we see an arm sticking out, and it looks like they're wearing a robe of some kind. So I imagine Mark Antony in Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, and he's being asked to give a speech, and instead he says, "Nah," and then he does a mic drop, and then he adds biatch, because of course Shakespeare was quite the wordsmith, and that helps me remember Namibia. So when we see this figure doing a mic drop, we think Namibia. Here's another fish, but I'm immediately drawn to the front half of the fish, where there's this angle. It looks like a knee that has been attached to the fish. And that makes me think of knee jerk, and knee jerk sounds a bit like Niger. So when I see this fish with the angle on its face, I think Niger. I see two heads here that have been stuck together. The one on the left, I'm imagining, is some English guy named Nigel. And then over on the right, I can even see a little crown, and that is Queen Victoria. And if you combine their names, you get Nigeria. So when I see these two heads, both of them have pretty big noses, one is wearing a crown, I think Nigeria. This looks like a head again to me, somebody looking down, and I notice there's something hanging off their nose. Maybe they have a runny nose, and so I'm going to call this guy Ron with the runny nose. But there's something going on at the top of his head and then down around his collar. So I'm imagining a big W in the top of his head, and then the letter A down around his collar. So we have Ron with W and A, which reminds me Rwanda. So again, when we see the shape of this guy with a runny nose, it's Ron with a W and an A, Rwanda. The big shape here looks to me very like a pig, but I'm going to say specifically it is a sow, and it is coming towards me. So I'm going to imagine I'm the little shape down at the bottom. And then behind it, there's a bird-like creature wearing a crown, and so we're going to call that creature Prince. And that's going to remind me Sao Tome and Principe. Again, when I see the pig shape and the little bird with the crown and me at the bottom, Sao Tome and Principe. When we look at this shape, we immediately see somebody with their mouth open and maybe a little unkind, but we're going to imagine this is a politician. And specifically, we're going to imagine it is Senator Al Gore, but we're going to write his name as Senator Gore, Al. And if we choose letters from that, we get Senegal. So again, when I see this head with the big mouth open, Senegal. Here's a collection of islands. The largest one looks to me roughly like a seahorse. So I'm going to imagine there was a seahorse there, and then there was a shell, but not a normal seashell, but an explosive shell that came along and blew it to smithereens. And so all of these islands are the result of a seahorse exploding. And so I'm going to remember the Seychelles. A seahorse and a shell exploded, Seychelles. This country, the shape really looks to me like there's a range of mountains running down the middle, culminating in that point at the bottom. And so we might call these the Sierra. And over on the left, I see a shape that could be a crocodile or an alligator, and we're going to call him Leon. And then over on the right, there's a guy leaning, and we can show him holding some Sierra mist just to help us remember that Sierra part. And this guy leaning helps us remember Sierra Leone. Again, when we see the mountain range shape culminating in the point at the bottom, and we have Leon on the left and the guy leaning on the right, Sierra Leone. The first thing I notice about this country is it looks like the number 7, which will help me remember that this country begins with an S. And to me it looks like a waiter bringing something out, but specifically he is a sommelier, and instead of bringing wine out, he's actually bringing the grapes. Maybe he's going to show us the grapes that were used to make the wine. There's even a little sprig sticking out from the bunch of grapes. And sommelier is going to help us remember Somalia. So when I see this 7 shape of somebody lifting up some grapes, I'm going to think Somalia. Here I see somebody floating along, and I'm going to imagine that it is former Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew, who has the initials SA. And through some clerical error, he has ended up in heaven floating on a cloud, and he is sipping ambrosia, which is also SA, and that's going to help me remember South Africa. So when I see this shape of somebody floating on the air, sipping ambrosia, I'm going to think South Africa. Well, I see a face here in the top left, and I'm going to imagine this is a slug called Sammy Slug. and somehow he's able to fly through the air, and he's doing pretty well until suddenly this rabbit lands on him, and he goes south suddenly, which helps me remember South Sudan. So when I see the shape of the slug with the rabbit, I think of South Sudan. Now here I see some very straight lines in the top left, and then some more rounded shapes on the other sides. So I'm going to imagine a washing machine, and somebody has put too much washing powder in the machine, resulting in suds and more suds. And that's going to help me remember Sudan. So when I see the straight lines and then all of the suds coming out, Sudan. I see somebody here, they're looking to their right, and somehow they have a very flat forehead. They also have a lump on the top of their head, and it looks like their eyebrows have fallen off. So I'm going to imagine somebody called Tan Zan, guy who really likes to tan himself in a tanning machine, but unfortunately the lid of the tanning machine fell on him, causing the flat forehead, the bump, and his eyebrows to fall off. And that's going to help me remember Tanzania. So when I see the guy with the flat forehead and the bump, Tanzania. This country obviously looks a bit like a snake, and that reminds me of the game of Snakes and Ladders, and the game reminds me of the Gambia. So when I see this snake shape, I'm going to think the Gambia. And by the way, the Gambia is located inside of Senegal. You'll notice it lines up completely with the senator's mouth. This country looks like a very tall, thin person, but their hand is sticking out, they're carrying something. So I'm going to imagine they're carrying a to-go bag of food, which of course they badly need, and that's going to remind me Togo. So when I see this very tall person with their hand out, I'm going to imagine a to-go bag and Togo. Here I imagine some mythical creature. He's got a long nose, he's got a pointy ear, big beard. So I'm going to imagine this guy can make tunes through his nose. And that's going to remind me of Tunisia. And he's holding his heart there as he makes these tunes out of his nose. That is Tunisia. Here I imagine another mythical creature. I'm going to imagine a guy named Ugg for obvious reasons. And he's riding on some other creature. It could be a dragon, it could be a griffin. We're not exactly sure what it is. So it's Ugg and which helps us remember Uganda. So again, when we see this guy riding on the back of a dragon or griffin, we remember Uganda. This country looks to me like an arm that is flexed, maybe somebody giving a punch. And I'm going to imagine it is Batman. He's punching somebody, and the sound effects appear. Zam. And then for some reason, biatch. I guess it's very influenced by Shakespeare. But Zam and biatch reminds us of Zambia. So when we see this shape of an arm giving a punch, Zambia. And finally, we have this shape here, which looks to me like some kind of weird pig creature. And so I'm going to imagine it is Babe from the film Babe has become a zombie. And zombie Babe will remind me of Zimbabwe. So again, when we see this horrifying pig creature, we're going to remember Zimbabwe. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks as always for watching.